Well, the Piedmont football season is coming to an end with just one game left on the regular season, but we now know that that last game will be it for the Wildcats, as a loss last week to Elgin puts Piedmont out of the playoff chase. Hi, I'm Ben Felder, news director of the Piedmont Citizen, and joining me is the Citizen sports editor, Ben Schupp. And Ben, going into these final two games for Piedmont, we knew that they were going to have to win both to get into the playoffs, and they weren't able to get that done last week, and so they'll go into this Friday's game against Weatherford with really not a chance to get into the playoffs for a second year in a row.
Yeah, like you said last week, was it for Piedmont. They lost 38-35 on a last-second field goal that Elgin's kicker made from about 20 yards out, if I remember right. This Friday is senior night against Weatherford, so obviously senior night's always an emotional game.
Yeah.
Last time you get to go out there, play under the lights on a Friday night, so that's the main thing this Friday in terms of what they have to look forward to.
Yeah, definitely a tougher second half of the season for Piedmont than the first half. Despite that season opening loss to Deer Creek, this was a team that had put itself in a pretty good position and was able to reel off some wins. They hit that tough stretch against Clinton and Anadarko, both the top two teams in districts. They lose to those two teams, but they still went into the last two games of the season with a chance to compete for the playoffs. And we talked about this last week because Elgin was a must-win situation. It definitely was not a game that they could afford to overlook. But you felt like Piedmont was the better team going in, and that if they could get that win, then that was going to create a pretty interesting matchup against Weatherford for the final game of the season. It would have been home, and the winner of that game would have taken the final playoff spot. Let's talk about Elgin for a moment. Did you feel like that was a game that Piedmont may have overlooked, or did you feel like they came in?
I don't think they overlooked them. Coach Church said yesterday, I talked with him, that was a game they felt like they should have won. They certainly had opportunities to. I think, looking back, one thing that stuck out in my mind about that Elgin game was Piedmont opens the game with a football. I don't remember the number, but it was like 5 or 6 straight running plays to open the game. They came out in kind of a no-huddle approach where they, if I remember right, one of the players once called it like a jet formation or a jet package.
Okay.
No huddle. They ran it 5-6 times in a row, picked up several first downs. They got inside the red zone. They get inside the 20, and then the offense stalled. They actually ended up going for it on, I think it was fourth and 8, I believe it was, from the 19-yard line. They go for it. They threw Stefan Funkhauser, ran her out towards the corner of the end zone. He was open, and Adams overthrew him. That, to me, was kind of a blown opportunity early in the game, because then throughout the course of the game, Piedmont was constantly playing catch-up. They trailed 4 times and ended up scoring touchdowns that tied the game 4 times. But you look back and you say, maybe if they score early, get the momentum in their favor, playing at home, like you said, it's a must-win situation, maybe things turn out a little differently.
Yeah. And, when we were previewing this Elgin game, Elgin was kind of a complex team. We were looking at who they've beaten and who they've lost to, and sometimes it didn't seem to necessarily make sense, or at least sometimes the score. There was a team that they would have played, that Piedmont would have played, and both would have lost. But on one hand, Elgin did a much better job, and then on the other hand, it was Piedmont doing a much better job. So it was we knew it was going to be a tough game, but we went in, I think, kind of feeling like that Piedmont was the better team, and being at home, that they should have a pretty good chance of winning this game.
Yeah, they were certainly in it. All throughout Friday night, like I said, they ended up tying the game 4 times throughout the evening. In the second half alone, the defense forced 4 turnovers that really helped keep them in the game. Without those turnovers, I don't know what the final score ends up, but I think it probably would have been a little bit more in Elgin's favor.
Yeah.
Or certainly, I don't think it would have came down to a last-second field goal that Elgin ended up making.
Yeah. Piedmont was able to make it to the playoffs last year under Coach Church's first season, a 6-4 record. Right now, obviously, they're not going to the playoffs. They sit at 4-5, so still a lot to play for on Friday. A win gives you a winning record at 5-5. 5-5 looks and feels a whole lot better than 4-6 does, definitely. But I know we still got one more game left, so we're not necessarily recapping the whole season here. But let's talk a little bit about where this team has come from day one, and have you seen this as a team that has taken some steps forward? And I think that's an important question, because there are a lot of young, in some key positions, there are a lot of young players in a lot of key positions. And so springboarding into next season is going to be important. Is this a team that you feel like has taken some steps throughout the year? Or?
Sure. You look obviously from the first game, there's been a lot of progression. Deer Creek obviously is a very good team. The offense really couldn't get anything going against Deer Creek in the first game. A month later they put up 50 points on the road at Cache. There's numerous games this year. Obviously the Hare game sticks out as an exciting one offensively in terms of they had that last minute drive. So the offense clearly has shown a lot of improvement throughout the year. As the case is with any team that has turnovers, that's going to hurt you. And I think when you look back at things, turnovers really killed Piedmont. It seemed like endless amount of times this year Brett Adams would throw a pass that would get tipped up in the air, and an opposing cornerback or linebacker or somebody from the other team would intercept it. That just seemed like it was a recurring theme over and over and over again. And I think that, turnovers was really one thing that kind of haunted the team throughout the season. Yeah.
What you talked to Coach Church this week about Friday's game against Weatherford, and talk a little bit about this game. What type of team is Weatherford, and what's the approach been like for Piedmont going in? Did Church talk at all about the team preparing to play a game that they know that ultimately a win or loss isn't going to matter for where you finish in the season?
One thing obviously talked about was the seniors last game. And obviously, just because they're out of the playoff picture, it's still a game they want to win. It doesn't, in their minds, in the grand picture of the playoffs, obviously doesn't have the same kind of impact, but it's still an impactful game in terms of, like you mentioned earlier, finish the season at 500, 5-5 versus 4-6, and having a losing record.
Yeah, well, this definitely was kind of a rebuilding year, which is kind of odd to say when a coach has only been in a program for 1 year before that, and his first year was a successful one in the sense that they got to the playoffs, but they lost a lot of those players, and so they brought in a lot of young ones. But I think Friday will be an important opportunity for them to really springboard into next year, which I think has the potential to be a pretty good season, especially when you look at who they're getting back. A freshman quarterback this year that went down with injury that we really didn't get a chance to see a lot of, but going into the season, it looked like he probably was going to be the starter if that injury didn't occur. And this has been a coaching staff that's really talked highly about that freshman class as well. So I think that there are some bright days ahead of the program here, but that still doesn't make last Friday's loss any easier to deal with. Piedmont will finish up the season on Friday, a home game. It'll be senior night as they take on Weatherford at Stout Field at 7:30. PiedmontDaily.com will be providing coverage of the game. We'll be previewing it in this week's paper as well, and then log on later this week after the game for a complete recap, game story, and highlights. For Ben Schuff, I'm Ben Felder. We'll see you again next week.